The air inside Flight 217 was filled with the usual hum of a transatlantic journey. Overhead bins clicked shut, the occasional chime of a reminder sounded, and the steady drone of the engines lulled many passengers into a half-sleeping daze. It was the kind of environment where people usually disappeared into their own worlds, some flicking through movies, others scrolling through phones, children playing with toys or crying softly. To most, it was just another routine flight from Boston to London. But in row 12 by the window sat a woman who carried herself differently. She wasn't flashy, nor did she draw attention with chatter. Her hair was tied back neatly, her clothes were simple, and in her hands rested a worn paperback novel with creased pages. She turned them slowly, deliberately, as if her focus was on the words, though her eyes drifted often to the window and the movement of the clouds. Anyone glancing her way would have thought her ordinary, just another traveler killing hours in the sky. Yet there was something about her stillness. Where others fidgeted, she remained steady. Where others sighed impatiently, she breathed in rhythm with the engines. And for those who might have looked a little closer, they would have noticed the faint scar running along her left wrist, thin, pale, the kind of mark that didn't come from an accident in the kitchen or a careless fall. It was the scar of someone who had lived through fire and steel, someone who had been somewhere most people would never dare step foot. Her name on the passenger manifest was Lane. That was the identity she had chosen to keep. But long before she had returned to being, she had been known by a different name, one not written in passports or credit cards but carried in radio chatter across combat zones. To those who had once flown with her, she was Falcon, a symbol of precision, courage, and calm under fire. It had been years since she'd last heard it spoken aloud. Years since she'd traded the cockpit of a jet for the anonymity of civilian life. Had told herself she was done. She had walked away from the roar of engines and the edge of death, choosing instead to live quietly among people who had no idea of the missions she had flown, the lives she had saved, or the enemies she had outmaneuvered. She boarded flights now not as a protector of the skis but as a passenger, content to blend into the crowd. And yet, as the hours stretched into the night and Flight 217 droned over the Atlantic, she felt a familiar unease. It wasn't turbulence. It wasn't nerves. It was instinct, the kind she couldn't unlearn, the kind that had once saved her life and the lives of her crew more times than she could count. The first sign was subtle, the captain's voice over the intercom. It carried a tone that passengers, half asleep and distracted, didn't notice, but did. "Ladies, and we may encounter some turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your..." To most, it sounded routine. To her, it sounded forced. She heard the edge in his words, the pause between sentences, the way his voice tightened slightly. It was the tone of someone hiding more than they revealed. Closed her book slowly. Her eyes shifted from the words on the page to the narrow aisle stretching in front of her. Passengers shuffled, fastening belts, joking lightly about the weather. The woman in row 12, however, wasn't thinking about weather. She was thinking about silence, too much silence on a frequency that should never go quiet. Her hand drifted to the small case beneath her seat, the one she never checked in, the one she told airport security was just for personal electronics. Inside was something she had promised herself she would never need again. But as she sat in row 12, the hum of the engine steady, the faint vibration of altitude beneath her, she felt the stirrings of a truth she had long tried to bury. She might not be done with the sky. Not yet. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Passengers assumed the slight flicker of cabin lights was nothing more than a quirk of the aircraft. A man in row 14 chuckled, nudging his wife. "Probably just old wiring," he joked, though his voice carried more nervousness than humor. Children clutched toys a little. A few people muttered prayers under their breath. To them, turbulence and flickering lights were part of flying. But Lane, sitting in row 12, knew better. She noticed the way the flight attendants exchanged glances near the galley, their smiles tight, their voices low. They weren't joking with passengers anymore. They were whispering to each other in clipped tones, carefully shielding their lips as though afraid of being overheard. eyes followed their every movement, dissecting body language as easily as she once read radar screens. Something wasn't right. Had learned long ago that the human body betrays truth before the mouth does. The rigid shoulders of the lead attendant, the quick walk of the co-pilot emerging from the cockpit, the too bright reassurance he gave an elderly man asking about the turbulence. It all screamed one thing: control was slipping. Up front in the cockpit, her suspicions proved correct. The pilots had been staring at blank screens for nearly 5 minutes. The radar, their eyes in the dark sky, was gone, completely black. They'd tried rebooting systems, switching frequencies, reaching out to air traffic control. Nothing, not a single signal responded. The captain's hand gripped the yoke the necessary. He didn't like admitting what his gut told him. This wasn't weather and it wasn't mechanical failure. This was interference. Deliberate. In the cabin, leaned back against her seat, her breathing even. Outwardly, she looked calm, just another woman with a paperback tucked into her lap. But inside, every muscle was alert. Her instincts roared to life, the kind honed by years of combat sorties. Radar didn't just vanish like this, not over the Atlantic, not without cause. The man seated next to her, oblivious to the tension in her eyes, tried to lighten the moment. "Funny how a little turbulence rattles folks, huh?" He smiled, though unease flickered beneath his words. "Probably just a glitch." Didn't answer. She kept her gaze fixed on the faint glow of the exit signs, the restless movements of the crew, the vibrations in the fuselage. She was listening not just with her ears but with every nerve in her body. Glitches didn't silence radios. Glitches didn't erase radar. She knew the signs of interference, of electronic warfare, of skis gone hostile. Her mind ticked back to missions long buried in memory. Missions where silence was the enemy's first weapon. She remembered the nights when her headset filled with nothing but static, when her wingman's voice vanished mid-sentence, when radar screens blinked empty just moments before missiles streaked in from unseen angles. Silence was never innocent. It was a predator's cloak. The cabin jolted suddenly, shaking as if the air itself had teeth. Gasps echoed through the aisles. Drinks spilled. Someone cried out. For passengers, it was turbulence. For it was confirmation. Something wasn't just wrong, it was deliberate. She shifted in her seat, her hand brushing against the small, hardened case beneath her. It was out of sight, tucked carefully where only she could reach it. To anyone else, it was an unremarkable carry-on item. To her, it was the last link to a world she had sworn to leave behind. A compact, military-grade radio, decommissioned officially, maintained unofficially. Her heartbeat remained steady. She could almost hear her old flight instructor's words: "Calm is control, panic is death." Around her, the cabin grew restless. A mother hushed her crying child. A businessman fumbled with his phone, frustrated that the in-flight Wi-Fi had cut out. The co-pilot slipped back into the cockpit, his face pale, his stride too fast. Passengers sensed something was off but couldn't name it. They dismissed their fears with excuses. Did not. She knew what it meant when the skis went silent. She knew what it meant when radar screens turned to darkness. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't weather. This was a storm of a different kind, one that carried shadows with wings. Straightened in her seat, eyes narrowing. She didn't want to open the case. She didn't want to be Falcon again. But deep down, she understood something the rest of the plane did not. The danger wasn't coming. It was already here. The cockpit of Flight 217 was a storm of silent panic. Buttons were pressed, switches flipped, frequencies changed in rapid succession, but nothing responded. The captain's knuckles whitened as he tried one last hail to air traffic control. Static, only static. The co-pilot shot him a look, fear thinly veiled beneath professionalism. Losing radar was one thing, losing communication was another. It meant they were flying blind in crowded skis, vulnerable to whatever hid in the darkness. Back in row 12, Lane felt every vibration of the fuselage, every unnatural jolt of the aircraft. She wasn't guessing anymore. She knew someone was interfering, The question was why. Her eyes scanned the cabin with the same precision she once used to scan instrument panels mid-dogfight. Passengers muttered nervously, shifting in their seats. The elderly couple across the aisle clutched hands, whispering reassurances. The teenager in front of her pulled out his phone, frowning at the dead Wi-Fi. No one understood that the silence outside was far more dangerous than the turbulence inside. His gaze moved to the cockpit door. The co-pilot had returned moments earlier, striding back with that too calm mask worn only by people hiding the truth. His lips had been pressed tight, his footsteps too quick. She'd seen the same look in young lieutenants before their first combat sortie, pretending everything was fine while their stomachs twisted in knots. The plane lurched again, sharper this time. Drinks spilled, cries rose from the cabin. His hand instinctively gripped the armrest, but not in fear. Her reflexes were those of a soldier, bracing not just for turbulence but for impact, for confrontation. Her pulse remained steady, a drumbeat of readiness. She thought of the case beneath her seat. She had carried it through countless airports, always waved through security thanks to special permissions no civilian would ever get. On paper, the radio inside was deactivated, little more than an old relic, but knew better. She had maintained it, tuned it, tested it in quiet hours. Some part of her had always known she might need it again. Tonight, that part had been right. Her fingers itched to reach for it, but she hesitated. Revealing it would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. To the passengers, she was just an ordinary woman with a scar and a book. To the Air Force, long ago, she had been Falcon, a name spoken with equal parts respect and relief by pilots who found themselves in desperate skis. She closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to breathe. Not yet, she thought. Wait, confirm first. The confirmation came seconds later. Out of the corner of her eye through the oval window she saw it, a flash of movement in the clouds, too fast, too deliberate, not lightning, not weather, a shadow, a shape trailing without lights. His heart tightened, not from fear but recognition. Fighters. Her book slid unnoticed to the floor as she leaned toward the window. A dark silhouette streaked by, gone in a blink, but unmistakable to her trained eyes. The passengers around her gasped, confused, convinced they'd seen nothing more than a trick of turbulence, but knew the truth. Someone was out there, tracking them. She bent low, reaching beneath her seat. Her fingers brushed the case. Cold metal, heavy. A lifeline hidden in plain sight. She pulled it closer, shielding it with her jacket, disguising the movement as casually as possible. No one around her paid attention. They were too distracted by the rattling cabin, too consumed with their own rising fears. Slid the latch open with a quiet click. Inside, the compact radio gleamed faintly in the dim cabin light, its collapsible antenna folded neatly. Old, yes, outdated to anyone else, but to her it was familiar, reliable, a bridge to the world beyond silence. Her thumb hovered over the power switch. She hesitated for one last heartbeat. If she pressed it, anonymity vanished. Her cover as Lane would shatter. She would no longer be just another passenger. She would be Falcon again. The plane shuddered, a violent lurch that drew screams from the cabin. Bags tumbled from overhead bins. Oxygen masks dangled threateningly before retracting again. The captain's voice broke through the intercom, tight, almost strained. Ladies, and remain calm. We are experiencing temporary technical issues. Please stay seated. Flipped the switch. The radio buzzed to life. Static roared, then cleared. She pressed the transmitter to her lips. Her voice steady, low, the voice of a soldier awakened from slumber. This is Falcon, civilian aircraft Flight 217, radar blackout, communications jammed, possible hostile presence. Do you copy? For a moment there was nothing, just static. Then a voice answered, cautious, sharp. Falcon, confirm identity. Her eyes closed briefly, the old call sign sinking into her bones like it had never left. She opened them again, gaze steely, as outside the shadows swirled closer. Confirmed, she said. "This is Falcon, situation critical." Radio crackled again, the voice on the other end clipped and cautious. "Falcon, we need verification. Identify by code." His throat tightened. The code. It had been years since she had spoken it, but she hadn't forgotten. You never forget the sequence that tethered you to survival. She whispered the string of numbers and words, her voice barely audible over the static. There was a long pause, then the reply came firm, almost relieved. "Copy, Falcon, we have you. Hold position. Do not engage. Assets are moving." She let out a slow breath. She wasn't alone anymore. But she wasn't safe either. Her fingers gripped the radio, shielding it under her jacket. Around her, passengers remained blissfully unaware of the battle unfolding in the invisible frequencies above their heads. They thought the turbulence was the enemy. They thought the captain's technical issues were temporary. Only knew the truth. Hostile eyes were watching them through the dark. The silhouette outside flashed past again. This time she caught more detail. Wings too narrow for commercial craft, a speed too sharp for anything friendly. Whoever they weren't here by accident. She leaned closer to the window, voice low as she reported. "Control, multiple bogies, no lights, altitude shadowing commercial flight. Estimate 2, possibly 3. "Copy that, Falcon. Confirm bearing." Closed her eyes, recalling the muscle memory of countless missions. She counted seconds between flashes of shadow and wing angle, listening to the subtle changes in the engine pitch. Bearing west-northwest, altitude steady. They're probing. "Assets en route, hold." Her stomach nodded. Hold. Such a simple word, but it meant trusting someone else to get there before things got worse, and things were already worsening. She snapped the antenna down just as a flight attendant appeared at the aisle. The young woman smiled, though her lips trembled. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Returned the smile, her voice calm. "Of course, just turbulence." She tucked the case further beneath her jacket, hiding the glow of the transmitter. The attendant nodded quickly and moved on, her eyes darting nervously toward the cockpit. Disguise held for now. But the decision weighed on her chest like a stone. Activating the radio had shattered the anonymity she'd carefully built for years. She was Lane anymore, not here, not tonight. The moment she pressed that switch, she became Falcon again, whether she wanted to or not. She remembered the last time she'd been called into action, the last mission where her name had echoed over comms. It had ended in fire and wreckage, a lost, a scar carved into her wrist and her memory. She had sworn never again. And yet here she was in row 12, dragged back into a war she thought she had left behind. Another jolt rattled the aircraft. Gasps erupted. A child cried out. Passengers clutched armrests, unaware that the true threat wasn't the storm outside but the hunters circling them. Lifted the radio again, her voice crisp, steady, professional. "Control, Falcon. Hostiles maintaining position. Request ETA for friendlies." "Falcon, assets are airborne. 10 minutes." 10 minutes. She looked around the cabin, at families, at couples, at people who had boarded this plane expecting nothing more than a routine flight across the ocean. They didn't have 10 minutes to spare. Closed the radio and drew in a breath, centering herself. Her training rose to the surface, smoothing out the panic that wanted to claw its way into her chest. Calm is control. Panic is death. The mantra echoed through her mind like it had years before, when she flew missions where the odds had been worse than this. The man beside her noticed the way she straightened, the focus in her eyes. He frowned. "You okay?" She offered a faint smile, just thinking about old times. What she didn't say was that old times had returned, whether she liked it or not. Outside, the shadows thickened, circling like wolves. Inside, Falcon sat ready, headset hidden beneath her coat, call sign alive in the air once again. And somewhere in the dark sky, jets roared off a runway, guided by her voice, a voice the world thought had gone silent forever. "Falcon, this is control. Identity confirmed. Maintain position. Assets inbound." The word steadied her, but only slightly. His hand tightened on the small radio, its weight a reminder of the double life she had tried to bury. She was supposed to be done with this, supposed to be nothing more than Lane, an anonymous passenger who read books and kept her head down. Yet here she was again, under a false ceiling of safety, responsible for lives that didn't even know they needed saving. The shadows outside thickened. Through the window she caught glimpses, dark shapes sliding across the clouds, silent and unlit, predatory in their movements. They stayed just beyond the line of recognition, never close enough for the average passenger to notice, but far too close for her trained eye to mistake. She leaned low, whispering into the transmitter. "Control, Falcon. Hostile contact confirmed. Estimate 3 units maintaining shadow formation, bearing steady." A pause, then, "Falcon, hold. Asset scrambled from Langley. ETA 9 minutes." 9 minutes. Exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to curse. She remembered firefights where 9 minutes had been the difference between victory and funerals. 9 minutes was forever in a hostile sky. Her gaze moved through the cabin. Passengers sat restless, sensing only what they could see, the turbulence, the flickering lights, the nervous faces of the crew. A mother bounced her crying toddler. A businessman slammed his laptop shut in frustration. A college student tried to joke with his voice trembling more than he realized. None of them saw the wolves circling in the clouds. None of them knew that survival depended not on the captain in the cockpit, but on the woman in row 12. Press the transmitter again. "Control, recommend immediate comms with cockpit. Pilot's blind. I can relay." "Copy, Falcon. Patch in." Static cracked, then shifted. The captain's strained voice filled her ear. "This is Flight 217. We've lost radar, instruments unreliable. Confirm, is anyone out there?" Waited half a second before replying, her tone crisp, authoritative. "Captain, this is Falcon. You're not alone. Maintain current heading. Do not deviate altitude." There was silence, then disbelief. "Falcon, did you say Falcon?" "Yes, sir," she replied evenly. "Follow my lead. Fighters are en route." The captain didn't press for details. He didn't have time. And maybe, somewhere in the back of his memory, he had heard the name, whispered in hangars and control rooms, a legend of the skis. Shifted, hiding the radio under her coat again as the man seated beside her gave her a puzzled look. "You some kind of air marshal?" he asked softly, half joking, half serious. She offered only a faint smile, something like that. Before he could press, the plane jolted sharply to the left. Gasps and screams rippled through the cabin. Luggage bins rattled. A tray crashed to the floor. His hand tightened on the transmitter as she leaned toward the window. A shadow had broken formation. One hostile had drawn closer, testing the defenses, making itself known. Her voice dropped to a low growl. "Control, Falcon. Hostile closing. Aggressive maneuver 5 o'clock low." "Copy, Falcon. Hold. Fighters 5 minutes out." 5 minutes, an eternity. His pulse stayed even, though adrenaline sharpened her senses. She could almost feel the thrum of the hostiles' engines through the steel of the fuselage, the predator circling prey. She remembered countless nights over hostile airspace when she had been the one in the cockpit, hunting, probing, testing. Now she was the hunted, or rather they all were, and she was the only one who knew. Her leaned closer, whispering, "What's happening out there?" Turned, her eyes steady, her voice calm as stone. "Nothing you need to worry about, just keep your on." She didn't say what she really meant, because I'll worry for you, I always have. The radio crackled again, a new voice urgent, steady. "Falcon, this is Viper 1, en route, high burn, say position." His lips curved just slightly, a ghost of a smile. She keyed the transmitter. "Viper 1, Falcon. Flight 217, grid 42 by 98, bogies circling, you're late." "Copy, Falcon," came the reply, with the faintest chuckle of recognition. "Didn't know you were still alive." His eyes hardened on the window, on the hunting shadows just beyond reach. "I am," she said simply. "Now hurry." Hum of the engines deepened, steady but tense like a heartbeat under strain, kept her gaze fixed on the window, eyes narrowing at every flicker of movement in the clouds. The radio pressed against her palm, warm now, alive with static and voices. "Falcon, this is Viper 1, 3 minutes out. Say status." She keyed the transmitter, her voice crisp. "Flight 217 steady at altitude, hostiles maintaining shadow. At least 3. 1 probing closer. Advise you prepare for interception." "Copy," Viper 1 answered, his tone clipped, already shifting into combat mode. "Stay tight, Falcon, we'll take it from here." Knew better. The fighters would need her eyes, her instincts, until their radars locked on. In the silence of jammed skis, she was the only thread stitching friendlies to the threat. The aircraft jolted violently. Screams filled the cabin. A coffee cup sailed down the aisle, crashing against a seat. Oxygen masks rattled above, though they didn't deploy. Braced herself, her body loose, not stiff, absorbing motion like she'd been trained to in a cockpit. Her clutched his armrest, eyes wide. "This isn't just turbulence, is it?" he whispered. She turned to him, her expression calm, her tone even. "No, but you'll be fine. Stay buckled." Out of the corner of her eye, she caught it again. The hostile fighter breaking from its formation, sliding dangerously close to the commercial jet. Its shape was clearer now, angular, sharp, designed not for comfort but for intimidation. Felt the thrum in her chest, not from fear but recognition. The maneuver was deliberate. They wanted to rattle the plane, test the pilots, maybe force a mistake. She pressed the transmitter again. "Control, Falcon, hostile making aggressive pass, 5 o'clock climbing." "Copy, Falcon," came the quick reply. "Viper's closing in 2 minutes." Her stomach tightened. 2 minutes felt like a lifetime when a hostile jet could close distance in seconds. She kept her voice steady. "Captain," she said through the patch, addressing the cockpit, "maintain heading. Do not engage in evasive maneuvers unless instructed. Repeat, do not engage. You'll only provoke." The captain's reply came strained but steady. "Understood." Leaned back slightly, eyes still fixed on the window. Around her, passengers clutched armrests in each other, convinced they were at the mercy of turbulence. They had no idea that predators circled them, their lives balanced on razor-thin margins. A sudden streak cut across the wingtip. Gasps erupted, passengers crying out as a shadow screamed past the plane. Caught only a glimpse, but it was enough. The hostile had come dangerously close, a flyby at lethal range. The cabin erupted into chaos. Stayed calm. She pressed the transmitter, her tone sharp. "Viper 1, hostiles now making direct visual passes. We don't have minutes." Static, then a firm reply. "Falcon, eyes on, contact confirmed. Weapons tight, we're with you." And then she saw them, 2 bright streaks in the distance, slicing through the clouds, contrails glowing in the faint moonlight. Relief rippled through her chest. The Vipers had arrived. The passengers pressed to their windows, gasping in awe as the sleek silhouettes of 2 F-22 Raptors slid into formation alongside the commercial jet. Whispers swept the cabin. "Are those U.S. fighters? What's happening? Why are they here?" Said nothing. She only gripped the radio. The Vipers weren't here by accident. They were here because she had called. "Falcon," Viper 1's voice came, steadier now, edged with familiarity. "Formed up. You're clear to coordinate." For a moment the years melted away. She was Lane, passenger in row 12. She was Falcon, voice of command, the unseen lead in skis gone hostile. Vipers hold position parallel. Hostiles circling at west-northwest, altitude steady. Watch for another pass. "Copy, Falcon. Weapons free if they light us up." Through the glass, saw one of the hostiles break hard, testing the formation. The F-22s responded instantly, banking with predatory grace, chasing the shadow back into the clouds. Cheers erupted in the cabin as passengers assumed rescue had come, but knew better. This was only the beginning. She whispered into the radio, calm and commanding, her eyes never leaving the window. "Stay sharp, Vipers. The wolves aren't done yet. Cabin of Flight 217 had transformed from quiet unease into a chorus of nervous energy. Children cried, phones recorded shaky footage of the Raptors streaking past, and whispers rose like a storm. Most passengers still didn't understand the stakes. They only knew their flight was flanked by war machines. Ignored the chatter. Her eyes tracked every flash in the clouds, every streak of contrail out of place. Her instincts painted a picture the others couldn't see, predators circling, waiting for the right moment. Falcon Viper 2, a voice snapped over the transmitter. Hostiles splitting, 2 southbound, 1 holding north. His mind clicked instantly into formation analysis. Copy. Viper 2 hold shadow on the southern pair. Viper 1 stay high on the northern tail. Keep them off our nose. This plane can't maneuver. Understood, Falcon. The light chimed overhead. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. Ladies, and please remain seated with your belts fastened. Everything is under control. But it was not yet. Leaned toward the window, her breath fogging the glass. One of the hostiles slid closer again, brazen, its nose angled toward the passenger jet as if daring the F-22s to fire. The pilot's message was clear. You don't control this sky. We do. Her whispered again, voice trembling. Why are you so calm? You act like you've seen this before. Didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on the fighter. Because I have. The radio crackled again. Falcon, they're testing us. No weapons lock yet. Keyed in, her voice flat. That won't last. They want leverage. A passenger jet gives it to them. Hold discipline, don't provoke unless provoked. Every word steadied the Raptors, but in truth, her pulse hammered. She knew hostile doctrine. Sooner or later, they'd make a move, not just intimidation. They'd push until something snapped. Then it came. The hostile at 5 o'clock suddenly surged forward, dipping low beneath the belly of Flight 217. Gasps erupted in the cabin as shadows streaked across the windows. For a heartbeat, the plane shuddered under wake turbulence. Contact, Viper 1 barked. Hostile under civilian bird, angle rising. His hand shot to the transmitter. Do not engage, not yet. They want crossfire on the jet. The seconds stretched painfully. Then, the hostile broke left, streaking out from under the jet's fuselage and climbing hard toward the F-22. His voice cut sharp. Viper 1, chase him off the nose. Viper 2, close gap, don't let them bracket us. Through the glass, she watched as the Raptors surged into motion, sleek, disciplined predators herding wolves away from the flock. The passengers cheered, mistaking maneuvers for victory, but saw the truth. The hostiles weren't retreating. They were probing, calculating. The captain's voice buzzed again, lower this time, meant only for crew but leaking through patch. Whoever you are, row 12, the first officer says you're running this show. Are we in danger of being shot down? Paused, weighing the truth. She owed him honesty. Yes, Captain, but not if we keep our heads. Fly steady. Let me handle the skis. There was silence, then a single reply, copy, Falcon, we trust you. Her chest tightened. She hadn't realized how much she missed hearing that, someone trusting her judgment without hesitation. It had been years. Now, once again, lives depended on her voice. Static broke in, louder now, urgent. Falcon, Viper 2, Southern bandits accelerating. They're positioning wide, this looks like a box. Her blood chilled. A box maneuver, classic encirclement. The goal, trap the civilian plane in a crossfire, force a mistake or worse. His voice sharpened to steel. Vipers, break the box before it closes. Push them wide now, keep them off our 6. This plane does not slow down. The Raptors peeled off, engines flaring, diving after the hostiles with breathtaking speed. The cabin shook again, passengers gripping armrests as the sky outside turned into a dance of predators and prey. For a brief second, his reflection stared back at her from the glass. Not Lane, quiet traveler with a paperback, but Falcon, the ghost of the sky, called back into a fight she swore she'd left behind. And the wolves were closing in. The night sky churned with shadows and steel. Flight 217 cut a steady line through the clouds, but the wolves were closing, tightening their circle. His knuckles whitened around the transmitter. The passengers around her were silent now, terror replacing chatter, every face pressed to the windows as predators swirled. "Falcon, Viper 1," came the calm but urgent voice. "Box closing fast. Orders." She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Every instinct screamed at her to seize a cockpit stick, to bank hard and break formation. But she wasn't at the controls. She only had her voice. "Listen carefully," she said. "Viper 1, go vertical, draw their eyes high. Viper 2, sweep the southern bandits wide, make them commit." "Copy, Falcon." The sky erupted. The raptors moved like lightning, one soaring high, contrails streaking against moonlight, the other diving low to cut off the encirclement. The hostiles reacted exactly as she'd predicted. Two chased the decoy upward, one swung down toward Viper 2, and the last shifted dangerously close to the passenger jet's tail. His breath caught. "Captain, hold steady. Do not climb, do not descend." "Understood," the captain's voice replied, taut but obedient. The hostile at the tail lingered, threatening, its nose practically kissing the fuselage. Knew the tactic, intimidation, trying to spook the captain into a mistake. If the jet banked even slightly, the wolves would have their excuse. Her mind raced. She couldn't risk the raptors firing this close to the civilian plane. The solution had to be cleaner, smarter. She pressed the transmitter. "Vipers on my mark, hard cross pass. Force him to break." "Standing by." His voice dropped sharp as a blade. "Mark." Through the window she saw them, two streaks flashing across the tail, raptors slicing past the hostile like hawks crossing wings. The maneuver forced the wolf to bank away or risk collision. It broke off, snarling into the dark. Gasps and cheers filled the cabin. But didn't cheer. Her eyes scanned the sky again. Something was wrong. Static burst in. "Falcon, be advised, northern bandit has lock. Repeat, he's painting us." Her stomach sank. The wolf above had positioned perfectly. A missile lock wasn't just a threat, it was a trigger waiting to be pulled. If he launched, Flight 217 wouldn't stand a chance. Time slowed. Every instinct, every lesson, every scar burned through her veins. She had seconds. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Viper 1, cut throttle, drop below. Viper 2, climb hard, port side now." The raptors obeyed instantly, crossing angles at lethal precision. The northern hostile adjusted, confused by the sudden shift. That half-second of hesitation was all it took. "Fox 3, Viper 1's voice roared over the net. Saw the flash, a missile streaking skyward, slicing through A brilliant flare lit the heavens, followed by the distant thunder of detonation. The northern wolf was gone. The others scattered instantly, their box shattered, their dominance broken. The sky, once crowded with hunters, emptied into silence. Only the raptors remained, steady and watchful, guardians against the dark. The cabin of Flight 217 erupted. People clapped, cried, shouted prayers and thanks. The captain's voice came over the intercom, shaky but resolute. "Ladies, and you are safe. The threat has been neutralized." Leaned back, exhaling for the first time in what felt like years. She slipped the transmitter into her bag, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. Her stared at her wide-eyed. You saved us. Who are you?" Met his gaze, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Just a passenger in row 12. But as she turned back to the window, watching the raptors hold formation like silent sentinels, she heard it crackle faintly one last time through the patch. "Falcon, this is Viper 1. Good to have you back in the sky." She closed her eyes, the word wrapping around her like a long-forgotten anthem. Falcon, not Lane, not the anonymous traveler. Falcon. And though she knew tomorrow she would fade again into ordinary life, Tonight the sky had remembered her.